everyone, it's Tyann with Lasting Change Therapy. As promised, I am beginning part 1 of my Overcoming Intrusive Thoughts series. This is actually way overdue because I started the Intrusive Thoughts series like about 3 or 4 years ago and wanted to do a how-to on overcoming it, and then just got caught up with life. And so I'm actually really excited to share with you the 4 treatment models that I use to help my clients overcome intrusive thoughts, also known as postpartum OCD or a symptom of postpartum OCD. So first, what are intrusive thoughts? Intrusive thoughts are those really scary thoughts, frightening thoughts that just seem to enter your mind without you inviting them in. A lot of my clients say they just seem to come out of the blue and they feel really terrifying. And there are some typical common themes that you can learn more about if you just watch my YouTube videos. And you can go to my channel, which is the Mommy Therapist, and look up those videos, or just go to my website with my vlogs, which is lastingchangetherapy.com/videos. And I'll put that in the comments below. But the most common themes that I see with the postpartum women are themes of harm coming to their children or their spouses, and it could be by their hands or others. So they may see, and let me just give a disclaimer, harm OCD can be a bit graphic. So just a disclaimer for some of you, when I give you examples, it can be triggering, but I want you to know that it's nothing to really overall be frightened about, because with the first treatment model that I'll share with you, we actually work first to honor some of these symptoms and see why they're there. So examples of harm OCD, or these harming intrusive thoughts that come to postpartum women, could include like even visions of throwing their child against the wall, stabbing their child, harm coming to their husband, car crashes, someone coming in to kidnap their children. So those are just some examples of intrusive thoughts, and you could see why that would feel so terrifying. And so that's the O part of the OCD, the obsessions or the thoughts. And then the C part of the OCD is then there comes compulsions. Because they feel so frightened, there are these mental or physical things that they do to help ease their anxiety. But unfortunately, these compulsions will then ultimately make the intrusive thoughts stick harder. Okay, so let me repeat that. Compulsions often make the intrusive thoughts stick harder. The compulsions are the fuel to the OCD. And so we, of course, ultimately want to find ways to work through the compulsions, or to have the intrusive thoughts without engaging in the compulsions. And then the OCD will get much better. The intrusive thoughts will get less sticky, and overall you'll find some freedom from these symptoms, okay? And so what are compulsions? Typically with intrusive thoughts in the women that I treat, we see more of the mental compulsions than the physical compulsions. So you're more likely to be familiar with like excessive hand washing as a physical compulsion, constantly checking the stove, checking the locks. So those are more of the physical compulsions. Mental compulsions are typically more like like reassuring themselves. So they'll see this thought come up that's really terrifying, and then they'll reassure themselves and say, everything's okay, or you're a good mom, you'd never do that to hurt your child. And then there could be like excessive prayer. There could be attempts of suppressing the thoughts and trying to make them go away. And then unfortunately, all of these attempts, again, actually make the thoughts stick harder, because it's trying to give meaning to thoughts that actually don't have a lot of meaning. And so a lot of times these thoughts just come and go for a lot of us. We see that 91% of postpartum women, 90% of people in the general population report having intrusive thoughts. For many of us, we just think, oh, that's kind of odd, and then we just let it go, right? For example, if you're parked at a red light and then you see yourself running over a pedestrian, you think, oh, that's an odd thought, and then you just let it go. You may walk over a bridge and see that, oh, I could jump off of this bridge and die. Oh, that's a strange thought. I don't really engage with it, and then I let it go, and then the intrusive thoughts don't stick. But actually, the more you try to reassure it, engage with it, try to get certainty that these things won't happen, try to disprove the fears, then that's when the thoughts actually stick harder. The example that I really like is just, if you just think of like, the pink elephants analogy. So they'll tell you, don't think of pink elephants, don't think of the long trunk, don't think of the big ears. And the more you tell yourself, don't do that, and you're engaging in with the content, the more you think about it and it sticks harder. And if you do this on a regular basis, it's all that you'll be able to think about. And that's how the intrusive thoughts work too. So there's going to be 4 treatment models that I'll share with you. I'll only go through the motivational model today, but it's the motivational model, the cognitive model. The hidden emotion is a huge one for my postpartum women. I'm really excited to share that with you. That will be week 3. And then we'll wrap up on February the 8th, and that will be week 4 with how to do exposure with these intrusive thoughts so you can actually really overcome them and regain some freedom in your life again. Okay. So feel free to ask me any questions along the way, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. So the motivational model basically first says that there are good reasons as to why you're having some anxiety around these symptoms. And so what my clients do first is look at one moment in time when you started to have an intrusive thought, and then identify what are some of the negative emotions that come up for you when you had this intrusive thought. So for example, last week on Wednesday, I had an intrusive thought about hurting my child. Again, disclaimer, it could get a little bit graphic and triggering, but let's say you had a thought that you were bathing your child last Wednesday, and you had a thought that you're going to drown your child. So you can imagine why that would be so terrifying. And for some reason, our minds seem to go to these worst case scenarios. So the motivational model says, in that moment, what are the emotions that come up? And so it could be high anxiety. You started to feel some depression, some terror. And then the motivational model says, how can these emotions in that moment actually benefit you? So instead of trying to stuff them and even stuff the thoughts, how do they benefit you? What do they show about you that's actually really positive? Okay. And so with intrusive thoughts for postpartum women, we actually see 0 correlation of any harm coming to their children. And in fact, the opposite is true. They go out of their way to avoid even bathing their children or being around sharp objects if they're seeing like those stabbing visions. And so it's even a negative correlation of actual harm. So what we see is that when you have these intrusive thoughts and you actually feel anxious about it, that's actually a sign that it doesn't align with your values. The chance of harm coming to their children is very unlikely, and actually 0 according to the research. Okay, but again, we don't want to reassure these thoughts. What we want to do first with the motivational model is answer, how do these negative emotions benefit me? How do the intrusive thoughts even benefit me? And what do they show about me that's really positive? So I'm feeling anxious about my child possibly drowning and dying. How does that benefit me? What does that show about me that's really positive? Well, it shows that I really care about my child's life. And then the benefits is they may actually go out of their way to do all that they can to protect their children and make sure that they're safe. Okay, you may relate to this if you're tuning in and you're actually a postpartum woman experiencing some intrusive thoughts. And then if I'm feeling sad and down about this, it shows that I actually really want to connect with my children. So a lot of my women who have these intrusive thoughts end up avoiding being around their child, or they may even make sure that someone's around when they're bathing their child. They may start to hide all the knives and the objects. So how can the intrusive thoughts actually be beneficial and show something really positive about me? Well, a lot of times we see it could actually be evolutionary. That these thoughts are here because if you think back in the days, if the moms were thinking about, oh, the lion could end up eating my baby, that's the worst case scenario, right? Then they're much more likely to protect their child and to keep them safe. And so now as you're having your child, maybe it's your first or your second, you're seeing that, oh my gosh, these worst case scenarios are coming into my mind, but possibly they're there evolutionarily, because then I'm much more likely to protect this really vulnerable being that solely depends on me. And then I could be there to really keep them safe because they matter so much to me. And it's almost like our body's way of like desperately protecting this thing that is the most important thing to us at this time. And when we look at approaching the intrusive thoughts in this way and the negative emotions that come with them, we are much more likely to feel some relief from shame, because a lot of times we feel ashamed and terrified of why these thoughts are here. We even think like, this shows that I'm a really bad person and a bad mom. And so when we just honor the symptoms in this way through this tool called Positive Reframing under this motivational treatment model, we see that we feel less shame. We see that then these emotions are more likely to naturally ease. Then when we try to stuff them and push them away, then they seem to even come back harder. The intrusive thoughts seem to stick even harder.